Hey guys, this is going to be my more in-depth review of The Legend of Korra as a series, and just really explaining my issues with the show and getting into the pros and cons of the season in a really in-depth way, because I feel like I need to really put it out there why I feel the way I do about this show, and explain to you that it's not just, bitterness or I'm so into Avatar that I couldn't accept this show. It comes from legitimate problems that I have with how the show was constructed and how it played out. So let me start off by saying that I do not think that Avatar: The Last Airbender is perfect. I had many problems with the way that the series ended and Book 3 as a whole. If you've watched my videos on Avatar, you know I do not really care for Book 3. But I was happy with the outcome and I accepted it. It was not the story that I wanted, but I felt it was a story that had to be told, and because of that, I could watch it and in good faith enjoy it. Because of that, I never really thought that Korra could not be a good show. I mean, I understood that it was going to be 12 episodes and it was going to be self-contained, so I expected it to be a little rushed at places, and I knew that it wasn't going to be 100%, in terms of character development and plot. But that was fine. No series is without flaws, and, without filler, we could probably get more complete stories. What I didn't expect from the show, however, was it becoming a really sloppy mess that didn't really seem to have any balance about what it was talking about. When I started, I was really excited because it was Avatar and it was coming back in a way, and for the first 4 episodes I really felt like it was gonna work. I mean, I didn't even like the Taylor Swift episode. Like, if you watch my review of that, I made excuses for it, that it could lead to more character development and stuff like that. But when the break happened, the little 1-week break happened, and I rewatched the series and listened to a few people really discuss the show and really think about it on my own, and not just be caught up in the hype of, oh my god, Korra's on, I really came to realize that the story was not really well explained. Just thinking about the series as a whole, I understand why people like it. I really do. Like, it was very entertaining in a lot of ways, but for me, the problem was that as soon as I put any thought into the show, it would fall apart. The writing just wasn't on par. And not because I was comparing it to The Last Airbender, other than for the sake of continuity about stuff like the Avatar spirit, the Avatar state and bloodbending and things like that. But the writing, because the writing for Avatar: The Last Airbender wasn't perfect to me either. But I felt like, there were so many problems. The way they wrote all the female relationships, the way they wrote Asami, the way they kind of, would never really develop the main plot line and stuff like that. That was a really big issue for me. But, if the criticisms don't bother you and you love it, then I'm glad you enjoyed it, play on. But for me, my problems really focused around the character development, the plot, and how the whole thing concluded. Before I get into this, please know that while I understand that the season was only 12 episodes long, for me that's not a valid excuse. There are so many programs, both in anime and in British television, or even in our Western animation, that tell good stories with 12, 13 episodes. And I think that there was no reason why they couldn't have done this in this show. They knew what they were writing for, and I brought up Madoka and they said it was based on a light novel. I didn't know that. I mean, I had no experience with the light novel when it came out, but either way, it stood on its own. And the important thing is that this show should stand on its own. And I felt like it didn't. And it wasn't about it being slow and not having enough episodes. It was about they did not focus on what I thought was really important, and the fact that it wasn't put well together. And because it was a shorter story, I feel like it should have been more tightly put together. Character development. This is probably the biggest issue I have in the show. I feel like we have all these characters, and none of them really get a chance to be people, because their real focus were just to be placeholders for certain stories. And this goes from Korra to Amon to Tarlok. And I feel like the most troubling character this is with is actually with Korra, because at the end of the season, we are supposed to accept and feel that she is this fully realized avatar, and in my opinion, and I will kind of prove it in this, hopefully, she's not done anything to prove that. And someone said in my rant that it wasn't true because she got in touch with her spiritual side in one episode, she practiced in one episode, and she had like a little bit of maturity in one episode. And yes, those things did happen, but they played no effect in making her character better on screen. And this is actually an example I found when I was looking at The Legend of Korra live journal, and someone mentioned that like the best example can be seen in her bending. The way she airbends in the finale, she's not doing anything that she hasn't already done. She's airbending the same way that she bends any other element. She doesn't change to fit airbending, fit its form, fit what it means. Airbending changes for her. And that was really important. She never became the leaf. She just kind of became an airbender. She could airbend, but she never became an airbender. She never got that in touch with that part of her. It just kind of needed to happen, so it happened. Also, look at the way she handled the whole Amon situation after she found out what happened with him, how he was really, Natak. She was just like, oh, let's go tell everyone that Amon is lying. And when that didn't work, well, they didn't have a backup plan. She ran into danger without thinking it through and put herself in the middle of all these equalists at a rally. And that's something that she would have done at episode 4. And here we are in the finale, and she's still doing that. I mean, she tells Mako that Asami needs him, and that's supposed to show as well how she's like growing and how she's becoming more mature, but she still flirts with him. And it's like we are told one thing and we are shown another. Like the scene in the episode before the finale, Turning the Tides, when she is ready to go fight the Equalists, and Tenzin's like, no, we have to stay, and she's like, we gotta form a plan, and Tenzin's like, you're learning. She didn't learn anything, because her first reaction, she didn't stop and think, she didn't ponder, she just immediately like, go into action, and then someone had to tell her to check herself before she wrecked herself. That to me shows me that despite what you are telling me, she has not grown. Because if she had grown, she would have thought before she acted. And she still doesn't really do that. It's like, my gut's telling me this. What does your brain tell you? What does your brain tell you to do, Korra? And the icing on the cake for me in the finale was the ending when she's by the cliff. I mean, she gives up. And I know that's supposed to be really sad because she's been brought to her lowest point. But being the Avatar is more than just bending. It shouldn't just be, because she can't bend, she's no longer an Avatar. She's still the Avatar. She still can airbend. She still has a duty to perform. And she just is like, nope. And it's like, after all she's been through, after seeing all that she needs to do in the world, shouldn't this drive her to just work harder or try her best to compensate for her loss? I mean, she tried so hard before, supposedly, even though we never really saw it. But no, she just cries. And because of that, she gets handed the Avatar state. Literally handed to her. She does not even meditate on the issue. She just goes into a cliff and cries. If she had meditated, maybe, if she had tried to show some kind of like calm reserve of her coming together and pulling herself together and be like, I can do this, I can still be the Avatar, still be strong even without my bending, that would have been great. That would have shown her development to seeing the spiritual side of bending. But she did not. It just happened to be handed to her. It had nothing to do with her spirituality, her growth. It was just plot convenience to make her story work the way the writers want it to be, but it also made it no longer important. It's just very poorly handled for a character who's supposed to go from point A as this really hot-headed person who has no spiritual side to be a fully realized Avatar, because that's what she is. She can control the Avatar state. We see that when she's doing the whole Equalist, getting the bending back. Therefore, she is a fully realized Avatar when he can do that. And they did not prove that to me. They did not write her consistently enough for me to believe that she could do that, because I can believe a lot of stuff that happens to characters. I mean, there are characters who go from being novices to being amazing warriors in animes and stuff in like 5 episodes. I mean, it's how you write it that makes it work, and they did not write that well. Mako, Asami, and Bolin were just there. I mean, episode 3, we got to see a little bit of Mako's background, and then episode 5, we got a little bit of Bolin, but after episode 5, Mako became the Bella Swan in this whole love triangle, and everything revolved around him and the whole Korra Asami situation. And that just bothered me. He's just hot-headed guy. Everything was about Korra, his reaction to Korra, or his reaction to like something Asami said. He no longer became his own character. He was just a love interest. And he was on a good love interest because the love triangle made it so that you could not... I found that the love triangle made me not root for Korra, and I no longer ship it. I don't think it's not endearing to me. I can't. But because of the way they handled it, he never got caught up by his actions. He never really had to even break up officially with Asami. I know it's implied, but that implication to me was bullshit. I mean, they don't conclude anything. It's just he moved on from one to the other. That's it. And it just bothered me. And when Amon complimented him in the finale about how no one's ever bested him before, and so tried to take away his bending, I'm just kind of like, really? Really? Like, Mako is supposed to be a weaker bender than Korra. But Korra can't do that, but Mako can. It just, I couldn't accept that. I didn't know. And I never really understood why I should care about him being with Korra, besides the fact that she liked him. I mean, why did they connect? I mean, why did they have a big attachment? We had one scene in episode 3 where we showed them being a little bit romantic, but beyond that, you know, it's kind of like we went from 3 to 5, and all of a sudden it was like, I'm in love with you, we're soulmates. And nothing ever grew from that. They never really sat down, talked. It was always just some weird confessional thing, and it never fit well to me. But Lin was 100% comic relief. Even when there were times where he should have been serious, he just wasn't. And it was annoying rather than endearing, because when Korra is having that whole situation and her bending is gone, he's cracking jokes still. I'm just kind of like, that makes no sense for him to be that dumb. He's too old to be that silly all the time. He's just a jokester. Asami, while I adored her, and I really did, she was not a character. She was overall pointless. She was there to be a placeholder for Korra, and her relationship with her father was bland, because in the end, there was never a point where her and her father had a chance where they're like, I see your point. It was always just like constant conflict. There was no growth. There was no development for Asami. She simply was there, and she was cool and she looked great, but that was it. She was just there. And I mean, the way she cares for Korra is like, I like that because, you know, they're friends, but why are they friends? After all that's happened, you know, I don't see why she would still be a member of Team Avatar. I mean, she was there because she was Mako's girlfriend, not because she was friends with Bolin, not because she was friends with Korra. She was there because she was, you know, with Mako. Like, I don't think Suki would stay with the crew if she wasn't with Sokka. That was her role when they joined the gang for her. So I don't really know what they were doing with that regard, and that really annoyed me. And moving on to Amon, and I have a lot of feelings about Amon because Amon was my favorite character in the show, and I really like Tarlok now. It's like Brown Gaston. He stepped his game up. He was actually a pretty cool character when you kind of think about his arc altogether. And I've been thinking a lot about how I feel about the whole Tarlok-Amon connection, because while it explained everything, like it explained how he knew where Tarlok was hiding, how he knew bloodbending, everything. It really does fit everything together. It felt like, despite that, it still weakened Amon character. I mean, and I heard a lot of people say, "Oh man, I can't believe people thought Amon was actually telling the truth about his backstory. Why would you believe him?" And like, here's the thing: I did not believe him, but I wanted to. And in the back of my mind, since the finale was coming closer, I was sure that they were going to make Amon a liar. Because it didn't seem like they wanted to really develop the non-bender issue, and they were going to need to discredit it really quickly. And the easiest way to do that was by making Amon a bender and lying about his backstory. And the train ticket, you know, because I texted you about this girl a couple weeks ago, that if they did that, I was going to be pissed off. See what happens when I tell you things? It comes true. I'm fucking, that's a raven. But yeah. So for me, thinking that he was actually burned and his story was true was wishful thinking. I wanted him to be more than just a typical villain. And while there were definitely hints of that, because I do think that they gave him some sort of complexity, it was so rushed that we really have no idea who Amon or Natak is as a character. Which would be fine, considering that it's kind of left to see like he doesn't really know who he is either, but it's just a really weak story overall. And I feel like I want to cut it some slack because of all the feelings I had for it, because I really did love that storyline. I love Amon. I loved that his whole thing. He was just awesome to me. There was so much potential there to really deal with the whole oppression storyline. But at the same time, I just feel like while it was a really good backstory, it didn't fit Amon to me. And, you know, okay, so why is it necessary for him to make up this big lie? Man, why can't he just be like, my father was Yakone, and I want to atone for his sins by ridding the world of evil benders, and then prove himself to his followers by allowing himself to, like, when he's not fighting, to be cheat blocked or have something like that? Because it does seem like he is against bending, but it's not really explained at all. And the whole bloodbending thing is just, I don't like it. I don't like it, to be quite honest, because all he's doing to stop the bending is using bloodbending, which is just advanced waterbending. So why is it such a big deal? Why can't Katara fix it? Why can't anyone fix it if it's just advanced waterbending? Because it's still just bloodbending, even if it is psychic. What does that even mean? Psychic bloodbending. What is that? It's, I mean, the fandom idea, which he was blocking chakras using chi bending, to me would have been a much better way, because the whole thing about the chakra right by the head where he's touching them is that, like, when the guru was talking about it, he was talking about, like, that's where illusion is. It makes you believe things are separated, and would make people believe that they're separate from their bending because they're so crowded by that illusion. And that would have been great, because that would also tie into the whole spirituality thing. But instead it's just completely like, you know, blood bending, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the chakra chi blending thing would have been a much better way to really do his character, even keeping his background. You can still keep his background and be like, he just stopped using water bending and blood bending and just did the chakra shit. And he kind of got the idea from blood bending, but he wouldn't have to use it. But you can still have the whole Tarlok thing. The best thing with Tarlok, like, I get what they wanted to do. I do. But as soon as they started with the whole "we are brothers" thing, I legitimately groaned. Because first of all, I called it as soon as it was happening, like, they're brothers. And I didn't think they were going to do that. That is just one of the biggest cliches ever. And when I talked about how Amon was a 14-year-old prodigy bender, I was just like, hello, Azula. It's nice to see you're back in the show. I mean, it was just a cliche after cliche after cliche. To a point where I really don't understand also how Amon went from being how he was in the beginning to being who he was in the end of the flashback, to being who he was in the beginning of our world, to becoming a person who was crying at the end. Like, it's all great. It's really emotional, and it's like it's got a lot of subtext, but what was actually going on the surface? We never got a chance to see Amon's perspective. We never got a chance to see his side, his thoughts, his ideas. It's always told through somebody else. And, you know, you had someone like Zhao, who was, you know, a main villain, and we even knew him. We heard him talk about him, and we knew what he felt about stuff. With Amon, no. And, you know, I feel like when he went to shedding that tear, I did love it in the sense that it felt me with feels, because he was my favorite character. But at the same time, I don't think that it worked well. The one thing I do like about it, though, is that he did become a morally gray character, and we are still kind of unsure about, like, who he really was, and that's cool. I think that is promising. But I just don't understand why they didn't talk about what he really meant to do more, especially when they had this whole build-up and it doesn't lead to anything. But one thing I did figure out and made me really happy is that I know why he was saving Korra for last. It wasn't because of anything special. It was because he wanted to reveal himself to Korra last because she's the Avatar. And he probably blamed the Avatar for his situation in life, because if Aang had never taken away Yakon's bending, he would have never had to deal with all that trauma as a child. And so the last thing he wanted to do was to take away the bending of the person who took away his father's bending and led him to be on this path. That was cool when I finally put that together. But again, that's me putting it together and not really what they're saying explicitly. So it's kind of like, I feel like I'm making the stuff I like happen more than the show is letting it happen. But now let's go on to plot, which is much shorter. Character development is actually my biggest thing, because character development is the thing that I care most about in a show. Because the thing about it is, like, plots, depending on, you know, what genre you in or whatever, become very predictable. What makes your stuff work is your characters. And for all the flaws I have with the plot, I would have forgiven them if the characters had been stronger. You know, as much as I like some of the characters that I like, I loved Amon. I loved Tarlok. I love Tano. I love Asami. I love Lieutenant. It's because of me putting stuff onto them more than them actually getting good character development in the universe. But still plot. So, book 1, Air. Except not really. So this season was supposed to be about 2 things. Korra learning airbending and dealing with her whole spirituality dealio, and dealing with the anti-bending revolution. Both of these things were just not well developed. Korra never spends adequate time on her airbending, and whenever the plot needs her to do something, she'll have an epiphany, like when she can, you know, all of a sudden go past that block and now she can communicate with her past selves. But that knowledge, that growth that we should see, not just you telling us that she can do it, but seeing it actually change who she is as a person, never happens. And that's my biggest problem with her arc, is that, and the way the plot wrote, is that she never really seems to take in those things at all. So that was my problem with that. With the anti-bending revolution, they never showed us the revolution, in the sense that we never got to see how the people on the streets felt about it. We get little things, we get like the little bullshit, like we all live in harmony together, but that's bullshit. Because look at all the people who were at the rallies with Amon. Where are they in the show? Why are they fighting? Where is the thing going on the streets between? I mean, you have the mob. You have all these different groups that are taking advantage of all these people. Why can't we see that? I mean, Korra is the Avatar. She's supposed to help people. Why don't we get to see her and the Avatar team if you're gonna do all these action scenes, do them while, you know, they're busting out these bender rallies and riots and stuff like that. It builds Korra. It builds the plot. It just fits everything, and yet that never happened. It's like, I never got to see that there was anything beyond the Equals Rebellion than Amon. But the problem is, there obviously is. I mean, there are obviously things that non-benders are going to get discriminated against, because there's stuff that they can't do. There's certain jobs they can never have, certain stuff that they can never really do. And, you know, since Bright had confirmed that all the council are benders, and then the police are benders, they have no representation, and they have no protection from the police because they're all benders. So it's a great story to start with, but it never went anywhere because they didn't get into it. And so it was just kind of like, what could have been a really interesting, complex plot just became a really generic good guy, bad guy thing. What it seemed to be touching on so much more in the beginning, because in the beginning you even have Korra telling this guy, you're oppressing yourselves, and we never get a full circle from that. The only person she ever blames for being oppressor is Tarlok, but she never admits that she uses her bending to hurt people. She never uses that she uses her bending to intimidate people. It's just, you know, she's a bender. That's who she is, and it never gets developed. She never stops becoming that kind of bully character who she was and who she is. It never made her go through that hurdle. It just kind of got brushed over. And so the third big thing is how everything kind of wrapped up. So the finale really wrapped everything up in this really rushed, neat little bow. And the sad part is that if the rest of the show had been up to snuff, I would be really forgiving of that, because that's one of the things that usually happens in a short series, is a rushed ending. That's something that happened in these past two animes that I just watched. I just watched this anime called another one called Black Rock Shooter, and the episodes were so good, but the last episode for Black Rock Shooter and the last two episodes for another were really kind of iffy, because the last episodes for another were kind of iffy, but all the episodes before that had been this wonderful growth of the characters in Black Rock Shooter and the plot in another. So that the fact was that, like, even though it rushed the last two episodes, one gave me a really strong plot, one gave me really strong characters, so at the end I was still satisfied because they still gave me something to have. Yes, this series is supposed to be self-contained, but it's supposed to be self-contained. We should, basically, this is my whole thing with Book 1 Air and why I'm not happy with it. We should look at this and be satisfied. We should be able to watch this without any promise of season 2 and be happy with the way it turned out. And I'm not. Forget that it's 12 episodes. Forget that it's supposed to be, that there's going to be a season 2. Forget that it got renewed. This was all we were going to get. This right here. Because from what I'm seeing about it, how it wraps up and looks completely like a season finale, there was no changes to this. If there are, I'll be really surprised, because if they did make changes, it doesn't seem like they made any changes that would make it any more interesting to me. It would make me want to see what it was like before they knew they were going to get renewed. But we should look at this and be satisfied. This should be all we need. And for me, it's just not. I mean, everything is too perfect. Korra being able to airbend, I'll swallow that. Korra getting her bending back, okay, I will swallow that. Korra going into the Avatar state, controlling it to return everyone's bending and becoming a fully realized Avatar, no. No. That is stupid. The season should have ended with Aang coming, putting his hand on Korra's head, giving her bending back, done. See her eyes glow, done. Avatar state, you get your little thing, perfect. None of this return everyone's bending shit. Why? Because it makes everyone losing their bending 100% meaningless. There are no longer stakes when you rewatch this show. Because, you know, it's not even Amon's backstory that would ruin it for me. It's not even, you know, knowing some of the stuff that happens. Because, you know, for the most part, I can ignore that. But everyone getting their bending back means that there are zero stakes. It means that anytime you see anyone risking getting their bending taken away, it is meaningless. For example, when I rewatched the episode with Lynn, like, I was upset when Lynn got her bending for a lot of reasons, but now it's meaningless because, one, Tenzin and his kids got captured anyway, which was bullshit. It made her sacrifice completely worthless. And then number two, she got it back so soon after. There was nothing learned from it. nothing gained from it. It was just there. And now that everyone can get it back, I no longer feel like there's any, like, what's the point? What was the point of this entire season if nothing transfers, if no stakes happen, if at the end of the day all your characters are basically in the same point that they were before, but with more powers? What was the point of this season? I don't understand how this was supposed to be standalone. I don't understand why I should feel like happy that everyone just gets everything handed to them. To me, that's how I feel about it. Like, this is just me. I feel like they got handed to them. I feel like Korra did not earn her Avatar state. She did not earn anything that she got in this season. Yes, she had a few episodes where she actually, got to show emotion, but that's it. That's where it ended. They never gave her enough growth. She never stopped being an intimidator or a bully or privileged. Nothing. She never grew. She never developed. She just simply was. But the plot would tell us when she would develop, even if we didn't see any evidence of that at all. So my final thoughts is this. Everyone keeps saying that they will develop stuff in season 2. And while I have heard that they are going to get, like, some of the writers from The Last Airbender, that doesn't make this season okay. They should have explained stuff that happened in this season. I shouldn't have to wait a year to find out about this whole 24/7 bloodbending bullshit. That should have just been explained 4 episodes ago. And I don't even want it to be explained by, like, the creators and, like, oh, well, here it is. Show us in the show. That's important. You just broke your own canon to make this happen and broke your own rules. Explain to us why. Explain. And the thing about it, too, is just, like, people like, you hate this show. Why did you watch it? It's not even that. I have so many feelings about this show. It's like, I do want to hate it. I want to hate it because I'm so frustrated with how it turned out. But I want to love it because there's so much potential in it. And I loved characters in the show. I loved Amon, Tarlok, Tano, Lieutenant, and Asami. But at the same time, I wonder if it's because of the fandom why I love them and not really because of how they were written. The first 4 episodes were really promising. And there are scenes that, I still like. Themes that I now looking back, I'm like, those were kind of cool. So part of me does like it a lot. But it's small parts of a messy whole. And the thing about it to me is just like, it's because how it concluded and how everything came together was just so convoluted that it dampers the enjoyment that I would have had. And it's like, I know I'm going to watch season 2, if only because people are going to ask me about it. And I don't hate Break. That's not the point. I'm just frustrated because it's not because the show wasn't what I wanted it to be. The Last Airbender was not all that I wanted it to be, and it's still one of my favorite shows. I'm frustrated because this could have been better than The Last Airbender. I love Avatar The Last Airbender, but it never got to do some of the things I wanted to do because they were focusing on the whole big goal, which is, beat the big bad Fire Lord. Okay, I get that. But Korra's gonna be about this revolution and politics and, future and finding the spirituality in life. That's fucking awesome. Plus, brown girl lead and beautiful animation. Fuck yeah. I wanted this to be the most awesome thing in the world. I wanted it to be that. And when I saw it wasn't going to be perfect, I was okay with that. I'm like, as long as it is good. As long as it has good writing, I'm okay. But it just never went where I thought it was going to go. And when it wasn't where I thought it was going to go, and I tried to follow where the show was going, I never understood why it was taking me to these places. And when it comes down to it, it's like, I dislike a lot about Korra, but I don't hate it as much as I feel like I want to. I feel deeply frustrated, but I think the thing I feel the most when everything's said and done is disappointment, because it could have been great. And I think it was a decent show with a lot of great things in it. And that explosion will give me feels for life. And I feel like I'll eventually probably warm up to it, because here's the thing. Yes, it was entertaining, but as soon as I thought about it, it just stopped. And I wish I could turn my brain off. I wish I could turn it off. But this show was never a show I had to turn my brain off for. So I'm not going to start doing that now.